Welcome to the Fast 5 Business News by Fear and Greed. I'm Michael Thompson, and good morning, Sean Aylmer.
Good morning, Michael.
Sean, today in just 5 minutes, we're looking at what will happen this year for the large cap stocks. These are the companies that everybody knows that dominate the local market. Think the big miners, think the banks, that kind of thing.
That's right. And in fact, a lot of us own these shares either directly or definitely through our superannuation funds. First, though, a quick reminder, this is general information only and you should get professional advice before making investment decisions. Steven Daghlian is a market analyst at Commsec. Steve, the large caps really are household names. What can investors think from the market generally, which are dominated by these large caps, in the next few months?
So very broadly speaking about, what investors can expect from markets when a new year kicks off. The first few weeks of January tend to be super quiet because investors have, maybe better things to do. They're spending time with a family, having a good time, and investing is not really top of mind. So light volumes is a thing, and that can happen all the way through to Australia Day. It also follows two unusually strong months. So even though January historically has been a pretty good month, it's something to consider that we've had two strong months. We've been hovering around record highs in recent times as well. And each time we've come close to a record high over the past few years, our market has either shied away or not stayed there very long. There's no guarantee we'll get a repeat of that this time around, but that's going to be a test, whether there's enough optimism around if markets can hang around kind of these levels or if they're going to shy away. When we get into February, it's all going to be about reporting season and how corporate Australia has actually performed, how resilient it's been. Certain areas of the market could highlight, a consumer who's under pressure. Ahead of the reporting season, though, of course, we've got the December quarter inflation update. This is going to be out on the 31st of Jan. This is going to be the key factor that really could dictate whether or not we're going to get a rate hike in February, which will be the first decision by the RBA for 2024. So that's going to be a key test. The expectation is that rates are likely going to remain on hold, and it will probably take a pretty big number and surprise for the RBA to pull the trigger and actually lift rates. If anything, what's more likely is later in the year, we could get our first interest rate cut. This is after 13 rate hikes. So that would be, I'm sure, welcome news for many if it ends up happening. But our expectation is that could happen around September. It's going to be data dependent, but certainly could be helpful for some areas of the market.
Okay, so the key themes for this year then, obviously interest rates is one of them.
Absolutely. I mean, I think inflation and rates, there's still going to be two of the key things to watch. And we've been saying this for a number of years. So, but unfortunately, it's still very important. So I think whether or not inflation keeps heading in the right direction, which is down, that's going to be important in coming months. So not only with the quarterly updates that we'll get on the 31st of Jan, but the monthly ones we also get. They're not, as broad as the quarterly ones, but just because of the focus and attention that inflation's getting, they're still going to be very important. Off the back of that is what happens to interest rates. So if inflation cools enough, that should keep central banks happy that at least they've done enough as far as hikes are concerned. But data could also show that economies are slowing more than expected. So if that happens, that's when we might get a potential cut rather later in the year. But even before that, the conversation around rate cuts might become more of a talking point and a thing. So that's going to be very, very important. If inflation is stickier, that's the type of thing that might have markets concerned, especially because of the strong end we had to 2023. So that is certainly going to be a risk for markets. Profit reporting season, as we said, is going to be very important. And then later in the year, of course, you've got the US election, which could just have markets on edge, perhaps, and a bit jittery.
Okay, another big impact on the local market, of course, is whatever happens in China. And in this instance, we're talking about the big miners. What's the outlook there, do you think, for commodity prices, really?
Yeah, well, commodity prices will almost certainly be, reliant on what happens in China. It's, as discussed in the past, but China is the biggest consumer of commodities. Half of the world's commodities basically head over there, and it buys a third of everything that we sell. Super important. The mining sector here in Australia, about a quarter of our market. The energy sector, about 5%. So combined, that's quite a healthy chunk of markets. But then there's always the risk of how a global economy is going to handle things. What type of impact have the rate hikes we've had over the past 18 months to 2 years had on their economies. Is it going to be more severe than expected? Is our economies going to slow more? Is unemployment going to rise? Is retail spending going to take a bigger hit than expected? So there's always a lag effect with this, and it's just a matter of, what type of impact it's done. Is there going to be a soft landing, or is it going to be a more significant hit to markets? And then, of course, black swan events. You don't know what could potentially happen over the course of the next couple of weeks, months, and who knows, later in the year. So always a risk, and especially, of course, since 2020, we know that the unexpected can happen.
Steve, thanks for talking to Fear and Greed Summer.
My pleasure. Thank you.
That was Steve Daghlian, market analyst at Commsec. Michael, it sounds a little bit like a broken record, doesn't it? Inflation, rates, commodity prices. Maybe that's just because of the economy we are.
Yes, I have been listening carefully, Sean, to you for quite some time, and these are sounding like some recurrent themes here.
Yes, they are. Rates, inflation.
Indeed. And as always, you should get professional advice before making any investment decisions. Thank you, Sean.
Thank you, Michael.
That's it for today. Make sure you hit follow on the podcast. A new episode every day, and regular business news back from January 15 as well. I'm Michael Thompson, and that was the Fast 5 Business News by Fear and Greed.